the good girls go to hell.
I hope you like today's hairdo. My hair needs a trim. I feel like a child, you know how little girls get the little waterfall ponytails? Here, better. That's a better view of it. Yeah, you can't really see because my hair is dark, but I mean, it's cute, but that's whatever too. Whew, oh my goodness. My feet hurt, I'm tired, and I'm gonna get through this review. And what is the review? Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. If you've seen my channel before, if you have kept up with this book series, then you know that this is the second in, as of right now, a trilogy. Starts with Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. It was one of those books where I really wanted to read it, and the wait for it was exceptionally long. I kind of forgot about it, and then somebody else said something about it and reminded me, and I was like, oh my gosh, when am I gonna get the book? And then, hey, I got it. I loved the book so much, which was an audiobook, that I went out, and this is very uncharacteristic of me. You know, I'm relatively frugal when it comes to audiobooks particularly. I went out, I bought Good Girl's Guide to Murder and Good Girl, Bad Blood on audiobook, and on ebook, and I put the third book on pre-order. I'm tempted to put all of the books on my Christmas list. That says volumes about how much I loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Which is why I was disappointed with Good Girl, Bad Blood. Not because it was a bad book, but because I thought it lacked a lot of the dynamic elements of its predecessor. When I first started getting into Good Girl, Bad Blood, I thought, all right, they're relatively standalone. You know, there are some elements that harken back to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but you don't necessarily need to read A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. But the further into Good Girl, Bad Blood that I got, sorry, that's a tongue twister for me. Good girl, good girl, good girl, good girl. Anyways, the further I got into Good Girl, Bad Blood, the more Jackson referenced A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So I'm gonna put it out there and say, read the first one, because a lot of players come back into the second one, and there's a high probability that you will get lost, and you'll be like, why are these characters important? Why are the events that are being referenced important? That reminds me, I still haven't told you what Good Girl, Bad Blood is about. So we pick back up with Poppy. Sorry, I wanted to call her Pippi. I told you, it's the end of my day. It picks up with Poppy, who in the first book had decided to solve a murder for her senior project. Now she's this well-known celebrity, and she has decided to start a podcast detailing what she did because she felt like the media had started to spin things in a direction that didn't put the right emphasis on certain aspects of the situation. This goes viral. It starts epilogue-y. So I'm gonna push pause right here and say, I didn't necessarily think that first chapter was necessary. I thought it would have been much more effective if we just picked up with the fact that she has this wildly successful podcast. I didn't need to see her putting it together, coming up with a name, and then putting it into the world, only to jump ahead however many months in time to our next scenario. Press play. She has this wildly successful podcast, and people are asking when she's gonna have a second season. She says, I'm not gonna have a second season. I have hung up my detective's cap. Sorry, that one came out really weird too. Hung up my detective's cap only for her friend's brother to go missing. I'm gonna also rewind just a second. One of my issues from A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was that Poppy had this really large friend group. By and large, they were unnecessary. Though we get to this book and her friend Connor is part of that friend group. And I was trying to withhold judgment until I got to the end of this book as to whether or not, okay, maybe we should have kept all of the friend group. But no, and even Holly Jackson pulls more of this friend group into the third book, I still feel like we didn't need that many characters because they were unnecessary. But Connor, I'm like, all right, the books are very close together, so sure, we could have kept Connor. I'd been fine with that, except he was a non-entity. He was a name, barely had a face, barely had any screen time. To me, it felt like world building where she didn't realize, hey, I'm going to build upon certain elements, but now that I'm here, I'm going to take those elements. I'm accepting the fact that he was in the first book just because it set the stage for her to have this good friend that she would, now we're catching back up, that she would break her vow of detective celibacy. So that's what happened is she, and this is something I kind of disagree with. I mean, I agree with, see, give me a moment. I will connect the dots. I'm just a non-linear thinker, apparently. In the second book, she, in retrospect, saw how she got far too caught up in the mystery, in solving the mystery. Where's my water? Oh, it's behind me. It's like, there. She doesn't want that to happen again, so she's hanging up that cap, okay? Only for Connor to come to her and say, my brother is missing, I need you, the police won't help me. She says, no way, like, I swore this business off. But then when she goes to the police thinking maybe they'll listen to her because of her success and her name and her fame, and they tell her no, she agrees to help find Connor's brother Jamie. I liked how Jackson gave the police credit where credit was due. So often in these books, the cops are the bad guys. The cops are too lazy to do their job. There is one policeman in particular who doesn't seem to be good at his job and is biased about certain things, and he's another character that bothers me, but I'm gonna get into that later. I appreciated how whenever a bad light could be shed on the police department, Poppy would always come back and say, I understand why they said no. It wasn't Poppy saying, oh, our police force is terrible, they're not going to do their job. She was just like, they don't have the manpower. They have priorities. So I can understand why they decided not to pursue this case. That was another little thing, and hopefully I won't have too many, but we know me, so I can't promise anything. The book is picking up with the town gathering to honor the memory of Andi Bell, who was the first murder victim, and then Sal, who had been the initial accused, but ended up not being her murderer. And so when we're at this memorial, Jamie, Connor's brother, passes by Poppy and she thinks, wow, he's acting kind of strange. She doesn't think anything of it until the next day when Connor comes to her house pleading for her help, saying, my brother's gone, this is unlike him, we need your help. She teams up with Connor, and then she brings her boyfriend / her partner in crime from the previous book, Ravi, in to help her because there's no idea like where Jamie went. He had begun acting funny, but nobody could figure out why. Like, nobody could figure out the cause. I thought this was interesting, and part of this annoyed me, and I'll get into more details about that later. So she decides, all right, this is going to be the second season to my podcast, which is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I'm going to use this to help me find Jamie. Like, for all the places that he was seen, let me reach out and say, hey, if you are here, send me your pictures, tell me whatever you might know. This is where I do have some issues, is we're getting through the investigation. Now trolls are starting to say not so nice things. And Poppy knows better than to listen to it, but apparently Connor cannot stop himself. Then another friend, Kara, who's an important part of the first book, one day she comes to Poppy and she's like, have you heard? And Poppy she has no clue what Kara's talking about. So Kara leads her to the forums where people are accusing her of making up this new crime in order to grow her popularity. That bothers Poppy. And then what bothers me and Poppy is these friends of hers, these tight friends of hers, doubt her as well. My problem with that is not only are they supposed to be her best friends, but they're part of this friend group that we've been introduced to but never expanded on. And so I'm supposed to care about them. I'm supposed to care about what they think, but I don't know them. And so now they're all of a sudden here. They have been non-entities throughout 98% of both books. And so their opinion is supposed to matter. I get that it is sort of what sends Poppy into a tailspin. The way they approach her and the way that everything blows up. I get it. It's supposed to be a turning point of sorts. But I thought it could have been handled differently. Different scenario, different characters. Because it really made no sense to me. One, Poppy has two best friends, Lauren and Kara. And then they have this trio of guy friends, of which Connor is one, and then a guy named Ant. During A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Ant and Lauren get together. And then in this book, so Ant is supposed to be Connor's best friend. Yet the entire time, he has shown no compassion or even really acknowledged the fact that Jamie is missing and that his best friend needs help because he's in this relationship with Lauren. And I get it. Young love, honeymoon stage, you're so caught up in yourself. But in an instance like this, I couldn't buy it. They have nothing to do with the story until this moment, almost like 3/4 of the way through, where after this revelation that people think Poppy is making it all up, they're like, yeah, well, are they right? We think they're right. It didn't make sense within the narrative, and it set a bad taste in my mouth. I'm gonna get to my big issue with this novel in just a moment. Poppy is still convinced that Jamie didn't run away, and she's following all of her leads, and eventually she learns that, she learned early on that he was being catfished by someone. She was trying to figure out who the catfish was. So we get to the end of the novel, and we learn that the catfish has a type. All the people that this catfish has been trying to talk to, and even after we learn who the catfish is, I don't understand how when she was trying to contact the catfish knew it was her. Anyways, but we learned the catfish was trying to find a particular person. They were targeting men of a certain age and a certain personal life. And it's because there had been a serial killer with the last name of Brunswick. And he had enlisted his son, his young son, to help him in certain capacities with his murders. He is found, he is tried, he is convicted, he dies. The son is put into the witness protection program. So we learn that this catfish is trying to find the son, who is called Child Brunswick. Somehow Jamie got caught up in it because when he had gone, doing the social thing online, lied about his age, lied about kind of his station in life. So this catfish thought, hey, this is a good contender. Only for Jamie to then say, I lied, I'm sorry, I hope we can still be together or whatever. What leads him to start doing his odd behavior is this catfish, this Layla, will not respond until Jamie says he will do anything for her. Now she starts testing him. She's like, I want you to go out and beat up some random guy. I want you to break into someone's house and steal something. Asking him to do certain things kind of test his loyalty. And so now we're learning this is why Jamie has begun acting funny. This is tying into the memorial when he disappears, because the big spoiler here, although first I'm going to tell you why I had a problem with this part of the novel. It came out of nowhere. Maybe, and I would have to reread the very beginning of this novel. It was referenced, the whole Brunswick thing was referenced, When we got to the point where we realized all of this is because someone is trying to find the child of a serial killer, I was extremely disappointed because most of the novel had nothing to do with it. I loved it. In and of itself, it was extremely interesting, and I wish it had played into a larger part of the novel. I wish that maybe, I don't know, somehow she had come across news articles of this, so it had already been on her mind, and she was, I don't know, because she's a detective and she likes that kind of stuff, she read up on it. I think what happened was it was referenced as a podcast. Or maybe we only learn of it as a podcast because she realizes it's about Child Brunswick and Robbie is clueless, and so she's like, have you not listened to any of the podcasts I recommended? I don't think there was anything in the beginning about Child Brunswick or these serial killer murders. I loved the idea of it. I liked how it changed the tone of the novel, because that was something that Jackson did really well in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and that is still something she does well here, is it's never the obvious, yet it totally makes sense. And so I'm okay with it going where I don't expect it to, as long as there's a logical reasoning for getting there. Like, you know, you talk to so-and-so, they lead you to so-and-so, they lead you to so-and-so. That makes sense to me. I'm okay with that. But you talk to so-and-so and all of a sudden it's so-and-so? That is not cool with me. The big spoiler here is the Brunswick murders were all of children. It is the brother of the final victim trying to find Child Brunswick. And I guessed, I'm just good, guys. I really am. Obviously, in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I didn't guess it all, but I had a pretty good inkling as to who part of the perpetrator was, because there were two. So I got one right. I didn't actually guess the second one. My guess went in a totally different direction, which I still would have preferred. But I got this one from a mile away. Not exactly why, but I knew who the bad guy was. And that is, and here's another thing I just don't get. We are told about one of Poppy's really good childhood friends, of whom we never meet. We may have met him in the first book, but again, we got a lot of characters that were non-essential. We are told about this new couple that lives in her old friend's house, and I just knew. I was like, there's no reason for this couple. So they're involved somehow. That's what was going on, is the husband, Charlie, he was the twin brother of the final victim, and he had held a grudge for 20 odd years. He had spent however many decades hunting down Child Brunswick, who, and this is something I like and I don't like, because I like how it ties into a character from the first novel, but I felt like it was a bit underdeveloped. Like, this sort of came out of nowhere too, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And Child Brunswick turns out to be, which isn't surprising because I couldn't remember his name even when I was reading the novel. That is not it. Oh my gosh, I feel like I need to do this whole thing over because I kept calling her Poppy and her name is Pippa. I knew it was wrong. I kept thinking royal family, and out came Poppy. Guys, I am so embarrassed as a book reviewer. Oh my gosh, I feel like I need a public flogging. Pippa, not Poppy. Pippa, not Poppy. Pippa, not Poppy. Stanley Forbes. Stanley Forbes turns out to be Child Brunswick. He is the head reporter for the local newspaper. My problem with this is that in the first book, when Andi goes missing, her body is never found, so she is presumed dead. And then everybody suspects her boyfriend, Sal. Sal, he's not white. There's a lot of discrimination and racism that goes on towards his family, and a lot of what vilifies him in the news is Stanley Forbes. When Pippa interviews him in the first book, you get the heavy sense that Stanley Forbes is a racist, and That is the whole reason that he keeps coming after Sal. Pippa cannot stand Stanley. Stanley never apologizes for what he does. He never owns up to the fact that he played a huge part in the town believing that Sal killed Andi. So then we get into this book, and all of a sudden he's a sympathetic character? She still doesn't like him very much. They have a better relationship because she solved the Andi Bell murder, and now she has respect of law enforcement, of media, of whoever, because of what she did. But I thought he wasn't the best character to pull in as a child killer in disguise, simply because his character went so unresolved. It's not that he in himself is the problem. My problem is that his earlier characterization didn't make sense with him then playing this kind of a role. Pip meets him at this abandoned house. She catfishes him pretending to be Layla and has him meet her at this place. Somehow I think Charlie had been watching her. So Charlie comes after Stanley's big revelation and admission. He shoots and kills Stanley Forbes. He has his own 10 minutes of fame where he tells everybody his big plan and the background behind it all. He runs away, and as of the end of this book, nobody knows where he or his wife went. Ravi. I like him, but he was another character where it felt like he should have been relegated to the first book, because Pippa did the majority of the detective work in this book, either by herself or with Connor by her side. I couldn't figure out why Ravi needed to be there. I liked that we saw that they were together, obviously, because this book takes place so shortly after the first one ends. It makes sense that he would still be in her life, but I thought he could have played a bigger role. What his role really is, and this is something that, again, bothers me, and I am hoping she expounds upon it in the third book. Because the third book is apparently when Pippa herself gets kidnapped or abducted or something. So I'm wondering how that's going to play out. But in the first book, and this is where I'm going to have to keep going back to the first book and tell you, you should read the first book to get a full understanding of who, what, where, when, and why in this book. Because a lot of it still has threads tying it and not quite severed enough. So in the first book, she, over the course of her investigation, was interviewing people connected to Sal and or Andi. And one of those people was this guy named Max. The whole scenario, Andi's disappearance, Sal's murder, happens because Andi's sister had been raped. Because Andi had been selling drugs. She sold Rohypnol to a classmate named Max. At the end of the book, it's obvious that he has molested, raped, drugged a number of women. And now in the second book, we are picking up with him being on trial. He can't actually be tried for the rapes because the statute of limitations has expired, but they are prosecuting him with lesser charges. So Ravi, he's in the courtroom and he's kind of reporting back to Pippa. That is what Jackson does to get rid of him, but still make him relevant. I'm on board with some of it because I'm glad that he's still there. I think if he had disappeared, it wouldn't have made sense. I wished, because of how heavily she leaned on him in the first book, granted, he was the brother of the original accused killer for Andi Bell's murder, so he was a bit more important, but they felt like a team to me, so we essentially broke up the dream team for this next novel, and he wasn't around enough for me to accept the necessity of his character. With this, the Max thing, in the end, here's a spoiler, he's found innocent. And Max is this rich guy, or rich boy, who had been able to hire a fancy schmancy lawyer. Obviously, that's just basically why he gets off. But I really kept expecting more from that plot line. Because again, it's not a bad plot line, and I do like the continuation. How we're tying things together, how we're making them count. But unless we're gonna further that storyline in the third book, I thought it was a bit disappointing as well, kind of boring almost. Because you do get the back and forth as to, is he going to be convicted? Is he not going to be convicted? Pippa and Ravi in their circle are so certain that he is guilty. And if you read the first book, you know he is guilty. Yet, you get the opposing side when Ravi reports back saying how well the lawyer did. And so you don't really know what the outcome is going to be. In the end, I thought something more important was going to come out of it. The one thing that does come out of it that it bothered me to no end was when we find out that Max is declared innocent. Pippa is so outraged because there's nothing she can do about it. Even though she essentially handed him to the prosecution on a silver platter, she uses the clip because when she interviewed in that first book, she got him to sign a release form so she could use anything he said. She releases the clip of him admitting to drugging and raping Andy's sister. And then she goes to his house because she knows that nobody's home because they're out celebrating. She breaks all of the windows. And then she paints rapist on his door. It's not that I don't understand her reaction, because there's an injustice done and she wants him to pay in some form or fashion. It just felt out of character for Pippa. That's another thing that bothered me in this book. I didn't know who she was anymore. In the first book, I get that she really got deep in her investigation. She did lose herself in some way in this investigation. But it painted her as somebody who will go to the ends of the earth to get things done. She sinks her teeth into something. She will not let go until she gets her answer. And then in this book, she felt much more mild. In the beginning, I bought it. It wasn't the healthiest situation for her emotionally or mentally, and sometimes physically, to get so involved in an investigation. Plus, she's haunted by the death of her dog and how it's all her fault. I thought she was mellow in this entire book, and then all of a sudden, oh, no wonder my neck is feeling kind of funky. It was twisted. And then all of a sudden, she doesn't get what she wants, so she destroys personal property? It was a bit extreme. And if she had been the Pippa of the first book, no problems. I'm with it. But the Pippa of the second book, she just didn't have that kind of character. And it just bothered me that this is just what she decides to do. That's a felony, people. And she doesn't think twice about it. Anywho, with the whole Stanley Forbes thing, as I already mentioned, I enjoyed the child Brunswick aspect. I think it would have been more effective if it had been woven throughout the entire novel rather than the latter half of the novel. I liked how, he was kind of planted early in another book and we never saw it coming. And I liked how even in this book, there was little instances in which, things like someone's calling his name and he doesn't answer. But it's easily explained by another character by, he does that sometimes. Because it does. Sometimes you get caught up or whatever and you just don't answer your own name. So I really enjoyed the little plantings of he is not actually who you think he is, and that was what was so successful for the first book. So I like seeing Jackson bring those elements back. Her crafting is fantastic. Her writing style is really great. On the whole, the audiobook is good, but the narrator would make Pippa a little too sympathetic at times. Like, the way she speaks, she's just a little too emotional, or she sounds a little too weak. And maybe that lended itself to why I felt Pippa was a bit too mild in this book. Same narrator, but I wasn't always a fan of the way she narrated. In any case, speaking of Stanley Forbes, we get to the end where he's been murdered. Pippa and a handful of other people are at his graveside burying him, which I thought was actually kind of brilliant. You never know, is the guy gonna have a bulletproof vest on? Like, is he somehow, what book was I reading? Okay, so yes, if I've posted this one, we're with it. If I haven't, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Emerald Green. So there's the Ruby Red trilogy, and the main character can't die, and so the whole thing is trying to get this Sorcerer's Stone. She's in danger, her boyfriend shows up, and then the bad guy is gonna kill the boyfriend, only learn that he took the Sorcerer's Stone elixir, so he can't die either. So that's kind of what you are expecting, is he's not really gonna die. Whether he is or isn't actually a good guy, he's a good guy for all intents and purposes. But once people learn of his true identity, friends become foe. And so we're at the funeral, and this mob comes protesting the fact that Pippa or anybody would be honoring him in death. And my sensible side says, you know, that's what people are going to do. But my skeptical side says, I don't buy it. Because I understand feeling betrayed or duped, but he'd been among them 4-ish years. It's hard to hide your true character. And he, to all these people, came across as this nice guy, although if you compare it to who he was in the first book, it doesn't really line up. So then for them to all of a sudden be like, just because they learned that he had a different name and was born a different person, they think he's a different person? That came out of the blue. And there was no trying to talk to these people, really. Like, yeah, okay, and I thought this was ridiculous. Pippa takes off from the graveside, like, runs into this mob and starts tearing posters and signs and breaking them. And yeah, she does yell at them, but then people haul her off, and that was about it. But I was just like, these people that we have met who like Stanley Forbes all of a sudden are a raging, torch-carrying mob when they learn of his true identity. This book just, it suffered from not enough and too much at once. It suffered from really great ideas, but they were not developed enough throughout the whole of the book, but were dumped too much in one place. If this book were a scale, the beginning is up here and the end is down here, which actually is great for a novel. You want the end to be heavier, to be more exciting, because that's where all the revelations are happening. But we can't be like this. You know, we gotta have a little bit more balance. I was sad that this is the way this book turned out, because it started strong, it had strong elements, but on the whole, I didn't like the way it came together. I didn't like the why and the who. Even with Charlie, obviously I'm just a naturally suspicious person, which is why I knew that he was the bad guy, because he seemed too good and he didn't play a heavy enough role, which shouldn't have clued me into anything, because obviously there's a ton of characters in these novels that are there in name only. But I kind of wish we'd gotten more of him too. I'm just going to circle back to Lauren and Ant. It just grates me the wrong way, where you'd think, as such good friends to both Pippa and Connor, would have been more supportive throughout the entire process, would have been more involved in the entire process. Rather, we get mentions of them. Like, oh yeah, they were at a party. And then the next thing we know, they're accusing Pippa of lying as well, and she's getting into a physical fight with them. From the scene, I liked the emotion it pulled for me. Because you know what? If they want to doubt, they're allowed to doubt. I think we just needed more explanation for it. We needed more character building for it. And because we didn't, that is just what continues to niggle at me, is that it was unnecessary. It came out of nowhere. And I think because I value friendships so much, the fact that these people who were supposed to be their best friends could have cared less, not okay with me. I mentioned how Pippa tried to catfish the catfish. They couldn't access Jamie's phone. Like, they don't know where the phone is, and so they can't get onto his social media platforms. Eventually, Pippa is able to figure out the password to his computer. Then she and Robbie and Connor are powwowing. She decides what they need is an account so that they can catfish this Layla person. The problem is, you can't just go in and start chatting someone. Apparently, I don't know anything about this, guys. Like, not a social media expert. I'm trying, but I'm not very good at it. What they realize is you can't just go in blind. You can't go in cold. If you have no followers, this catfish not gonna have anything to do with you. So Connor offers up his alternate Instagram account because apparently he's into art, but he didn't want to let anybody know because he didn't want to be made fun of. So he has two accounts. One is an art account in which it, showcases his photographs and whatnot. So they use this to try to chat up Layla, only for Layla to say, "I know it's you," and delete all of her accounts. How did she know it was Pippa? Because from what you could tell from the profile, you didn't know it was Connor. So how could this profile be traced back to Pippa? I feel like my makeup is weird. It sure is. I guess I wiped this eye a bit more. That's pretty awesome, guys. Pretty awesome. Unless it's because Charlie was expecting Pippa to dig. Maybe what Charlie did was he only reached out. So if somebody was going to reach out to him, he would be on high alert that maybe it was Pippa. I don't know, but I thought it was really strange. I liked how it propelled the novel forward because someone is one step ahead of Pippa. Someone's watching her. Someone knows what she's doing. But again, just all of the events kind of not enough for me to say I loved this book, especially in comparison to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I could not put it down. Oh my gosh, that came out of nowhere. There we go. My favorite part, as always, was Pippa's investigative skills. Although, retrospect here, I did wonder how she got so good for the first novel. I could understand the second novel because she's had that one experience and she's probably read a lot of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, immersed herself into what it means to investigate. But this book got me to wondering, how did she get so good for that first book? Even though this one didn't impress me the way I wanted it to, I say go for it. Can't wait to hear from you. Let me tell you. You tell me which book you liked better, what you liked from one, what you didn't like from one. I will catch you later. I cannot wait for the last book, especially because it sounds so good. Catch you on the flip side. Bye. La, 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 Blues Brothers anyway?